I stood still as my son, David, shouted, "Don't argue with my wife in her house." Her house. My throat went dry. Brianna smirked from the recliner like she'd just won a court case. The blue velvet one I'd saved up for by cutting coupons and skipping pedicures. She looked so at home in it. Legs crossed, baby hairs laid, one manicured hand resting on the arm like a queen receiving tribute. I didn't say a word. Couldn't. If I had opened my mouth, it might have all spilled out. The rent they never paid, the car insurance I still covered, the groceries they left half rotting in my fridge. Instead, I blinked slow and stared down at the coffee table. The same table I had scrubbed clean that morning, wiping fingerprints and crumbs they never seemed to see. "I'm gonna need you to lower your voice, Mama," David added, as if he hadn't just pierced something sacred. The voice memo on my phone was still running. I'd hit record 30 minutes ago, out of habit more than anything else. Something in me knew the tone in Brianna's voice at breakfast wasn't just PMS or a bad night's sleep. Knew the way David walked around like a guest wasn't accidental. My instincts, dulled by years of just be nice and they're young, had come roaring back. I felt the muscles in my jaw tighten. The TV buzzed low in the background. One of those court shows where someone always ends up owing someone else money. Fitting. Outside, the sun filtered through the blinds, throwing shadows on the floorboards I'd had redone back in 2006. Hardwood, warm oak stain. Paid in full, I could feel it in my bones. This was the moment everything shifted. When my own son looked me in the face and told me I was out of line in my own living room on Eastway Drive. They'd only been here temporarily for the last 15 months. Supposed to be 3. But 3 turned to 6, turned to, "We're trying to save up." Turned to this moment, me standing in front of the sofa I bought, in the house I paid off, being told to stay in line. The deed was upstairs in the hallway file cabinet, dated 1998. My name, no one else's. My legs felt heavy, like I was rooted to the laminate. I didn't cry, not yet, but in the silence after his words, I felt something subtle inside me, something deep and old, begin to stand up. I sat at the kitchen table, trying to breathe through the sting. Not just the sting of his words, but the deeper one, the one that reaches your spine and whispers, "You let this happen." They slammed the guest room door, like punctuation on a verdict. I heard Brianna mutter something. Probably, "She's so dramatic," and then the low murmur of the TV picking back up. My own house, and I was sitting there like a visitor, waiting to be called back in. The kitchen still smelled like pine sol and the peach cobbler I baked that morning. The crust hadn't even cooled before everything fell apart. That oven had turned out cobblers for decades. First for my late husband Walter, then for David when he was a baby, then for every church potluck Second Baptist ever had. I reached for the photo on the fridge, the one of Walter in his fishing hat, smiling like he could still fix anything. He'd passed in 2014. Stroke, quick and cruel. I stood in this very kitchen holding the EMT's clipboard while our son sobbed into his sleeves. Back then I'd thought, at least I still have David. That David was gone. The house was mine, bought with Walter's VA benefits, paid off in 2011. I had the letter from the bank in a folder upstairs. No liens, no second mortgage, just me. When the check came clearing the balance, I remember standing right where I was now and saying, "I did it, Walter, we did it." Now here I sat, a widow, a mother, a woman nearing 66, being treated like dead weight in her own home. They didn't even ask if I'd eaten before taking over the stove this morning. Cooked bacon in my cast iron like it was theirs. Rearranged my spice rack. Brianna even put paprika in my grits once. Said it was more modern, but what got me wasn't her, it was him. David. My baby boy who used to cry if I left the room too long. He looked right through me today like I was a tenant out of contract. I touched the photo one last time and whispered, "Not again." Just last week, I was at Second Baptist, folding bulletins while Deacon Morris cracked jokes and the choir ran scales in the sanctuary. My Wednesdays were for the soup kitchen. Sundays, the Lord's house. Mondays, I walked to the corner store for scratch-offs and canned peaches. That was my rhythm. Predictable, quiet, mine. Then Brianna needed help with groceries again. Then David's account accidentally overdrafted. Then they showed up with boxes and stories and sad little smiles, and I said yes, like I always do. It started last December, when they asked for 3 months. Just, till tax season, Mama. I agreed. Of course I did. Who else was going to take them in? Their last apartment had mold, and their credit needed work. And I thought, it's just temporary. Now it's October, and there's a dog in the backyard I didn't ask for, and a second Netflix account on my Wi-Fi. The fridge still held my old grocery lists, my handwriting next to David's requests, almond milk, turkey bacon, sparkling water. Not for me, of course. I still eat grits and fried eggs. But I'd kept making the lists, kept shopping, kept letting their wants reshape my routine like water over stone. I pulled one of the lists off with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. It was dated 9/14 and titled, Things They Like. I had stopped making a list for myself months ago. Bittersweet, that's what it was. The realization that my kindness had become a leash. That they'd grown used to my giving and now expected it like sunrise. That all this generosity, little deposits over time, had added up to a woman erased in her own home. I didn't want thanks, not exactly, but I did want some recognition, some sense that they knew I had held things together, kept the lights on, covered their overdraft charges and emergencies. Instead, I was reduced to a shadow in my own hallway. I thought of the soup kitchen, how even the unhoused men with missing teeth and plastic bags for shoes always said, "Thank you," when I handed them plates. Brianna never said thank you. Not once. I looked at the photo of Walter again, this time with the list in my hand. "You would have handled this better," I whispered. But maybe not. He was generous, too. A little too soft where David was concerned. I folded the list in half and placed it inside my Bible. I was beginning to remember who I was. The guest room used to be lavender. Walter painted it himself, 2 coats with a foam roller, and gospel music playing loud from the radio. Now it was gray, cluttered, and lifeless. Brianna called it modern, but all I saw was a room that didn't belong to me anymore. I stood in the doorway with my phone, scrolling through old texts from David. One from last December stopped me cold. David, "Mama, can we stay till tax season? Just 3 months. Promise." Me, "Of course, baby." Those 4 words, "of course, baby," said too much. They said I'd forgotten to ask for boundaries, that I'd made room again without thinking what it'd cost, that I believed, foolishly, love was about saying yes. I remembered how that text came after Brianna's mother suddenly had to move out of state. I remember the big dramatic story they told about how they'd be on the street if I didn't help. I paid $1,200 to get them moved out of that apartment. David said he'd pay me back. I told him not to worry about it, and $600 for the second-hand bedroom set Brianna fell in love with on Facebook Marketplace. She sent the link like it was a bill I already owed. No, can we? Just, here it is. I walked into the guest room. It smelled like old hair grease and takeout. Boxes everywhere, clothes in piles. A ring light still plugged in from Brianna's little content corner. The quilt I hand-stitched with Walter in 2009 was stuffed in the closet under a yoga mat. She'd taken over this room the way some people spread into power, quietly, insistently, with no apology. I bent down and picked up a shoe, one of hers, strappy and silver, and set it by the closet. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I was something else, something steadier. I opened my Venmo app. The log showed 2 entries, 12 quarters minus $1,200, move-in support, 12 ninths minus $600, furniture for guest room, no repayment, not even a note of thanks. I screenshotted the page and sent it to myself, titled the email, Record of Support. I'd never needed to do that before. But something in me said I'd need proof before this was over. The door behind me creaked. Just the house settling, probably. But still, I stood up straighter. 3 months had turned to 10. And that silver shoe? It wasn't going to collect dust here much longer. After dinner, if you could call a half-soggy microwave meal dinner, I sat at the dining table under the good lamp, the one with the warm gold shade that makes everything feel honest. I opened a fresh notebook and turned to the first page. I wrote at the top what I've given. Then I started listing. Not guesses, not feelings. Receipts. January 5th, 2023 minus $700, direct deposit to their joint account. February 2 minus $50 Visa gift card, Brianna's birthday. March 11th minus $700 again. March 27th minus $134. Target run, I drove and paid. April 14th minus $60. Uber for David to job interview. May 3rd minus $700, like clockwork, and on it went. 18 months of help. Sometimes groceries, sometimes utilities, always cash when they were short, just until Friday. I flipped through my Truist bank statements, each transfer highlighted in yellow. I added everything up twice, once with a calculator, once by hand. $17,860. That's what I had given since January 2023. Not counting food I cooked, water I didn't track, or the gas I paid when they borrowed my car. They'd never paid rent, never bought paper towels, never even filled the ice tray after using the last cube. I leaned back in my chair and let the number settle in my bones. $17,860 was half my rainy day fund. Walter and I had saved that slowly. Tax return by tax return. Overtime by overtime. That money was supposed to be for a roof replacement or a new washer when mine finally gave out. Instead, it had vanished drip by drip into people who looked me in the face and asked for more. On the table next to the notebook was a Ziploc full of receipts I'd started saving months ago when I first felt uneasy. Target, Aldi, Spectrum. Each one with notes written in the margins. David's toothpaste, Brianna's oat milk, house Wi-Fi. I opened the Truist portal on my iPad, printed out the last year's statements. Ms. Grant at the branch once told me, "Keep your records clean, especially when folks stop saying thank you." She was right. So I stapled the statements together, clipped them to my notebook, and added a cover page. Support provided, January 2023, present. I stared at the stack like it was an affidavit. In a way, it was. This was no longer a favor. It had become unpaid labor. It was January when the first real chill set in. Not outside, but inside the house. I remember it clear as day because I'd just come back from grocery shopping, and my phone wouldn't connect to the Wi-Fi. The Spectrum bill was paid. I always paid it on the 2nd of the month. I fiddled with the router, unplugged and replugged it like the instructions said, then called David. "Ask Brianna," he said. She changed the password for security. Security? Brianna was in the guest room, what used to be the guest room, filming one of her product review videos with the ring light blinding the whole hallway. I stood just outside the door, waited for her to finish saying, "Hey babes, welcome back to my channel." Then I asked, polite but firm, "Did you change the Wi-Fi password?" She didn't even look up. "Yeah. We had some issues with signal dropping. I reset everything." "What's the new password?" She clicked her tongue. "It's written on the fridge. But you don't really use it, right? That silence you hear when someone tries to make you invisible? That's what I heard." I stood there, blinking slow, while her lashes fluttered at the camera. Later that night, I checked the email connected to the account. There it was, an automated message from Spectrum confirming the router reset. New password, new security questions, none of them mine. I forwarded the message to myself and flagged it. Changed without consent. A little thing, right? A password. But it was the moment I realized I'd been locked out of more than the internet. The house no longer responded to me. Lights left on, doors unlocked, thermostat cranked up like Duke Energy wasn't still drafting from my checking account. They weren't just tenants. They'd started acting like they were the owners. And me? I was the one asking for access to what I'd built, paid for, and kept running all these years. I told myself then it was just a fluke, a hiccup. But looking back, that was the day the locks began to turn, quietly, invisibly, against me. It was February 9th when I opened the upstairs hallway closet and found my Sunday dresses stacked in a plastic storage bin, like old rags. The hangers were gone, replaced with Brianna's winter coats and David's cluttered shoe rack. My shoes, too wide and too flat for her liking, had been shoved behind a tower of Amazon boxes. I stood there for a good minute. No panic, no yelling, just looking. The lavender dress I wore to Walter's retirement party was folded wrong, creased across the waist. My choir robe, still smelling faintly of starch and white musk, was wedged behind a yoga mat. I carried the bin downstairs, one slow step at a time, and left it in the garage. That's where everything ended up lately. Garage full of their overflow, extra clothes, half-used toiletries, Brianna's side hustle boxes with half the tape still hanging loose. I didn't say anything at first, but when I mentioned it casually at dinner, y'all moved my things from the closet. David said, "We needed the space, Ma." I looked up from my plate. "You could have asked." He didn't look sorry. "We figured you weren't using it. You've got your room." My room. Like I was a guest in my own house. I didn't argue. Instead, I walked out to the garage and ran my hand over the dresses like a museum exhibit. The air was musty and humid. Charlotte in early February isn't kind to storage. I checked the utility bill for the garage heater the next morning. Duke Energy said it had doubled. Apparently, someone was using space heaters out there. Neighbor Ms. Connie noticed too. She leaned over the fence while I was trimming the camellias. "Got folks living out there now?" she asked with a wink. I just smiled tight and said, "Something like that." She shook her head. "That's why I never gave my son a key. Love 'em. But folks forget who paid the mortgage real quick." Later that evening, I found the receipt for those dresses from Belk, back in 2010, still in the envelope. I tucked it into the same folder as my bank statements. Another line in the record. Another inch lost in a house I paid for. This wasn't just disrespect. It was a quiet kind of eviction, one room at a time. February 22nd was the day I heard it plain. I was in the living room behind the stairs, folding towels fresh from the dryer, still warm, still carrying the lavender scent I liked since Walter passed. The house was mostly quiet, except Brianna talking loud on speakerphone upstairs. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. But her voice carried, and I caught every word. "No, girl, it's fine. We'll gut the kitchen once her name's off it." I stopped mid-fold. The towel slipped from my hand and hit the hardwood with a dull thud. "I told you," she went on, laughing. "It's basically ours already. David's just got to handle the paperwork stuff. She won't fight us." I didn't breathe. I didn't move. Not fight? Who did they think they were dealing with? My name had been on that deed since 1998. Walter and I bought this house for $89,000, with his VA loan and a lot of praying. We repainted every room ourselves. The kitchen she was so ready to gut? I chose those cabinets with my own 2 eyes at Lowe's. Paid in full. The receipts are still in the envelope drawer under the microwave. I reached for my phone and hit record. Didn't catch the start of the call, but I captured enough. Brianna talking about modern finishes and how they were tired of asking permission in a house they lived in like guests. That voicemail got saved to my Google Drive. Labeled it 2 to 22 Brianna Kitchen Takeover.mp3. Later that night, I opened her email on the shared iPad. She'd left the tab open. Zillow searches. Listings in our zip code. Filters set to 3-bed, 2-bath, flip potential. She was house shopping. Not for somewhere to go. For what to do after I was out. I printed the page and added it to the binder. Took a photo of the iPad screen too, just in case. That Sunday, I sat with Pastor Reeves after church. I didn't spill everything. Just said, "I think a storm's brewing in my home." He put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Start praying and preparing." So I did. I stopped folding towels for them, stopped adding their snacks to my grocery list, and I started printing everything. February 26th, I decided to give them one last out. One more chance to show me they had a shred of respect left. I waited until dinner time, when they'd be home, fed, and maybe less defensive. I cooked spaghetti, set out plates, made it feel neutral. They sat at the kitchen island like company. Like they didn't know I'd been watching my house disappear piece by piece under their feet. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and said, "I'd like y'all to move out by June. That gives you 3 full months." David blinked fast. "Mama, I'm not kicking you out today," I said gently but clear. "You've had time. You've had help. And now you've got a deadline." Brianna didn't speak. She just leaned back in the stool, arms folded, eyes narrowed, like she was already writing a counteroffer in her mind. David looked between us, then finally nodded. "Don't worry, we'll go sooner." I wanted to believe him. So much of me wanted that to be the end of it. After they went upstairs, I took a notepad from the drawer and wrote in pen, "June 1st, final date, no extensions." I tore the page out, folded it, and tucked it under the butter dish on the kitchen counter. No witnesses, no signature, but it was something, a marker in the sand. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept hearing Brianna's phone call replaying in my head. Once her name's off it. My name, the one I carried longer than she's been alive. The one I signed on every utility, every insurance policy, every check. But still, I gave him 3 months. I told myself I was being fair, Christian, patient. That maybe they'd surprise me, they didn't. The next morning, I found my paper note moved to the sideboard, underneath a stack of mail I hadn't read. Like it didn't matter, like it was nothing. That's when I knew. Kindness alone wasn't going to get me my house back. I would need paper, witnesses, authority. But first, I would need the truth to finally hit me where I lived. They didn't plan to leave. They planned to inherit, alive or not. The sun was setting in streaks of orange and gray when I sat in my car at the end of the driveway. March 3rd, 6:30 p.m. The same day David told me not to argue, in her house. I'd taken my keys and phone, but not much else. Just needed space to breathe. Inside, I could still hear them moving around, laughing, actually. The TV turned back up, their voices light like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't been gutted. I stared at the dashboard. My glove compartment held the original title deed, signed, stamped, and notarized in 1998. I kept a copy in the house, sure. But Walter always told me to keep a spare, where they can't get slick. So I did. I pulled it out now, smooth and uncreased, and laid it in my lap. Owner of record, Clarice D. Williamson. Property address, 7217 Eastway Drive, Charlotte, North Carolina. Loan paid in full, October 3rd, 2011. That paper had more power than my name in their mouths. I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed 5 words. No more. This ends now. I saved it. Marked it March 3rd, 6:32 p.m. My own version of a declaration. I didn't cry. I'd done that last year when Brianna accidentally tossed Walter's fishin' hat in a donation bag. I'd done that when David borrowed my car and brought it back with a cracked bumper. I'd cried for the soft betrayals. But this wasn't soft. This was strategic. They weren't fumbling adults anymore. They were making moves that could leave me cornered if I didn't act. So I called a locksmith, left a message. Then I sat there, watching the porch light flicker on automatically. The same porch light Walter rewired himself, a motion sensor tied to the walkway. He did that after our neighbor's car got broken into. Said we don't wait on trouble to knock, we light the way and face it. So that's what I planned to do. Face it, light it, name it. And this time, I'd do it with everything they never thought I'd use. Paper, dates, proof, and a spine I'd kept quiet for too long. Inside, they laughed. But out here, I stopped begging and started planning. March 4th, 8:15 a.m., I woke up early with purpose in my chest and cold air in the house. First thing I did was grab my phone and log into the Truist app. I'd memorized every screen from years of watching money go out. Not today. I canceled the $700 auto transfer to David and Brianna's joint account. Tap, confirm. Gone. I scrolled through my contacts and called Cash App next. Spoke to a woman named Nia with a voice like sweet tea and steel. I need to close 2 active links, I told her. One to David Williamson, one to Brianna Williamson. Effective immediately. Yes, ma'am, she said. Want me to block their usernames too so no new requests come through? Please do. She paused before hanging up. Just so you know, you're not the first mother I've helped do this, but I hope you're the last. Then I logged into Duke Energy. Changed the name on the account to Vacant Owner Occupied. It was an option for people in transition. The meter still runs, but the charges go to the registered occupant. Not me. I forwarded the confirmation to myself and printed it later at the library. My phone lit up a few minutes later. David. WTF? The lights just cut off in the garage. David. Ma. What are you doing? David. You can't just... I turned off notifications. Let them feel the silence. I took a walk to Truist Bank's Freedom Drive branch. Ms. Grant, the branch manager, saw me before I reached the counter. Her eyes widened, then softened. You ready to shut the spigot? She asked, already printing paperwork. I should have done it sooner, I said. She led me into her office, closed the door, and asked gently, Do you need to place any fraud alerts? Revocations of access? I did. And I did it all. David used to be a secondary contact. That ended today. We updated PINs, removed authorized users, and changed passwords. She printed me copies of every change, stapled them together, and slid them across the desk. People think love means endless money, she said. But love got limits. And those limits? That's where peace starts. I left the bank with a folder full of boundaries and a heart that finally felt like mine again. March 5th, I took a tote bag and rode the number 5 bus to the library on Freedom Drive. It was the same branch where Walter used to pick up tax forms every February, the one with the big oak tree out front and quiet as a church sanctuary inside. I walked straight to the print station. Sharon was working the front desk. White curls, thick glasses, voice like a hymn. Miss Clarice, she said, you need help scanning today? I need help making a record. She nodded once and pulled out a USB drive from her desk drawer. Let's get you set up. I laid out everything I'd brought. Bank statements, receipts, texts, emails. Each page told the same story. One-sided generosity, unacknowledged support, silence in return. There was the Venmo log with monthly transfers. A screenshot of Brianna's Zillow search. Flip home Charlotte 28,205. The voicemail from February 22nd. And the handwritten June 1st move-out deadline they'd conveniently ignored. I organized them into folders. Folder 1, Rent Support, Statements and Transfers. Folder 2, Communications, Texts and Emails. Folder 3, Voicemail Evidence. Folder 4, Ownership, Title, Deed, Utility Records. Sharon helped me scan every page, steady and slow, no judgment in her face. Want to save it under a name? She asked. I tapped the keyboard. My house. My proof. She smiled. That'll do. After scanning, I printed hard copies and slid them into a 3-ring binder I bought from CVS that morning. Red cover, fresh plastic sleeves. I added one last sheet at the front. Clarice D. Williamson, 7217 Eastway Drive, ownership file. As I zipped the binder shut, my phone buzzed again. Brianna, email. You're making this harder than it needs to be. We could have worked this out. I didn't reply. Instead, I printed the email and added it to folder 2. Marked it with a sticky note. Manipulation. March 5th. That binder felt heavier than it should have. Not in weight. Paper is light. But in truth. In all the little moments I'd said yes, when I should have said wait. All the things I'd paid for in silence. I didn't just want them out. I wanted this history recorded. Because when the time came, I wasn't going to argue. I was going to show my work. March 6th was a Wednesday. I walked into the office at Second Baptist like I was coming home from war. Pastor Reeves looked up from his desk and gave me the same look he gave widows and single mothers. Calm, steady, no pity. "You all right, Sister Williamson?" he asked, setting down his Bible. "No," I said, "but I'm getting there." I told him everything. Maybe not in every detail, but enough. About the disrespect, the money, the kitchen takeover plan. About David's voice that no longer sounded like my son's. He leaned back, took a deep breath, and said, "You need help?" "Not the kind you think," I said. "But I might need the church hall. Private meeting. Sunday evening." "It's yours," he said without hesitation. "And if it gets legal, we've got a small fund for justice matters. I'll check the balance." He slid a small notepad across the desk and said, "Write down what you need. We'll make sure you're not alone in this." I walked out of that office feeling 10 pounds lighter. Then I called my cousin Lorraine. Blood of my blood, she'd seen this mess coming. "About time you called," she said. "I told you that girl wasn't right. And David? He ain't been right since he let her run your birthday dinner like it was hers." I laughed, first time all week. She added, "Let me know when to come. I'll be there. You need witnesses? You got one." That night, I got a text from David. "David, why are you dragging other people into this? This is family business." 10 minutes later, Lorraine texted me a screenshot of her reply to him. "Lorraine, if it was family business, you would have respected family property." She'd said what I couldn't. I saved it to the binder. Folder 2. I also added a sticky note to the front. "Witnesses confirmed. Pastor Reeves. Cousin Lorraine. Funny how a woman can stand alone for so long that she forgets she's not truly alone. But the moment she draws a line in the sand, really draws it, people show up behind her, willing to stand on her side. I wasn't just someone's mother now. I was a woman reclaiming her house. And I had backup. March 7th, just after breakfast, I typed up a 3-day notice to vacate. Pulled the language straight from the North Carolina General Statutes, Chapter 42-3. I didn't add anything emotional. No speeches. Just the facts. Tenants, David Williamson and Brianna Williamson. Address, 7217 Eastway Drive. Notice. You are hereby given notice to vacate the premises within 3 days due to unauthorized occupancy and non-payment. Date, March 7, 2025. Signed, Clarice D. Williamson, sole owner. I printed 3 copies. One for the binder, one for the porch, one for the ring camera. I walked outside, calm as morning dew, and taped the notice right on their door with blue painter's tape. No damage, just visible. The breeze was crisp. Camellias were starting to bloom along the fence line. A cardinal chirped on the wire above the driveway. As I turned to leave the porch, I heard the ring camera chime behind me. Motion detected. Perfect. Later that afternoon, Brianna found it. She ripped the notice clean off the door and looked dead into the ring lens. "This is harassment," she snapped. "You'll regret this." Then she tore it in half, one slow rip, and let the pieces fall to the porch. I downloaded the footage, saved it to Google Drive, labeled it 3-day notice delivery. Tampering recorded. I didn't flinch. I didn't open the door. I just watched from the kitchen window with my tea, pinky raised like my mother taught me. Then I called Legal Aid of North Carolina. Their hotline was busy, but I waited. After 32 minutes, a paralegal named Janelle came on the line. I explained my situation. She said, "You've got every right to reclaim your property. Just document everything. And don't skip the formal steps." "I haven't," I said. "I've got binders." She chuckled. "You'll do just fine." Before we hung up, She emailed me the full eviction packet. I printed it later that day, added it to folder 4. They'd torn up the notice, but the law had seen it, and so had the camera. It was still March 7th. The sun was down, but the drama had only just risen. At 9:03 p.m., there was banging on my front door. Not knocking, banging, like he meant to rattle the whole frame loose. I'd been waiting. My phone was already propped on the bookshelf, camera rolling. The ring was active too, every angle covered. I opened the door slowly. David stood there, fists clenched, eyes wild. "You're crazy," he shouted. "You can't kick us out." I didn't blink. "Yes, I can. And I have." I held up the folder with the deed inside and pulled out the document, a fresh copy of the 3-day notice and the notarized deed from 1998. "Still in my name," I said, calm. "Always has been." Brianna came running up behind him in socks and a bonnet. "We have rights," she yelled. "You're old and confused." Lorraine stepped forward from the shadows of the hallway behind me. She'd come an hour earlier, said she had a feeling it was time to stand close. "You heard her," Lorraine said, arms crossed, voice full of Carolina steel. "She owns this house, and she's done playing nice." David looked like someone just told him the bank was closed for good. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "Now," I added, "you can leave quietly and start packing, or we can let Mecklenburg County settle it. Either way, your time here is running out." "Where are we supposed to go?" he snapped. "You should have thought about that before you tried to erase me." Brianna tried another tactic. Her voice dropped soft, almost sweet. "You'd really do this to your own son?" That's when I felt it. The click. The moment the guilt no longer worked. The door slammed shut in me, not out of spite, but out of clarity. I lifted the papers again. This is what I'm doing. With love. And boundaries. Then I closed the door. Let the record show. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I presented documents, a witness, and the quiet resolve of a woman who'd finally had enough. Outside, I heard them arguing on the porch. Heard David say, "She ain't bluffin'." He was right. By Sunday evening, March 9th, Fellowship Room B at Second Baptist Church was ready. Not a big space. Just 4 folding tables pushed together, chairs lined in a square, and the projector humming softly in the corner. The smell of lemon oil and hymnals lingered in the air. I had laid out envelopes at every seat. Inside each, printouts of the financial transfers, screenshots, utility bills, and copies of the 3-day notice. Pastor Reeves stood at the front with his glasses perched low, reading a passage from Isaiah while folks filtered in, mostly family, plus Ms. Connie from across the street, and 2 deacons who'd seen me cry in that church's pews over the years. At 6 p.m. sharp, I clicked the remote and the first slide lit the screen. 7217 Eastway Drive. Financial history and proof of ownership. David sat stiffly beside Brianna, who crossed her arms and looked bored. But she didn't leave. Not yet. I didn't speak in anger. I spoke like I was reading weather. Just the facts. Calm, true, undeniable. Slide after slide. $700 monthly transfers. 18 entries. Utility payments. All in my name. Screenshots of texts. Asking for help. Voicemail transcript. Once her name's off it. Bank statements from Truist Title Deed, dated 1998. I finished with a page labeled $17,860. Total given without rent or return. Pastor Reeves stepped forward. "These receipts," he said gently, "show a woman who gave from her heart and her hands. What they do not show is a legal tenant agreement. What they do not show is consent to have her home treated as anything but hers." David's legs started bouncing. Brianna whispered something in his ear, then rolled her eyes hard enough to see it from across the room. I didn't raise my voice. I raised the binder and said, "This is my house. Not a gift, not a handoff, not a soft target. I looked at each person seated there, and I called this meeting not for pity, but for clarity. If anybody ever asks what happened in that house, y'all will have the truth in your hands. No theatrics, no dramatics, just paper, witnesses, and a woman standing flat-footed in her power. At 6:25 p.m., I unzipped the red binder, placed it on the table, and opened it wide. 5 witnesses sat around me. Cousin Lorraine at my right, Ms. Connie across from me, her eyes sharp behind her readers, Pastor Reeves beside the projector, 2 deacons flanking the room with folded arms and quiet reverence. I passed around USB drives, labeled, tagged, organized. Then I pulled out the thickest stack. "Here," I said, sliding them one by one across the table. "Every transfer I made. 18 months, $17,860. No rent paid back, no agreement, no thanks." Next stack, screenshots, texts, calling me a burden, talking about how they'd gut the kitchen once her name's off it. Zillow searches, property flips. I printed it all. I laid down the email from Brianna, "You're making this harder than it needs to be," and placed it on top of a spreadsheet. 1 column for dates, 1 for amounts, 1 for notes. Every dollar tracked. Brianna let out a laugh. Short, dry. "This is ridiculous," she said, grabbing her purse. David didn't move. He was staring at the deed copy in front of him like it might catch fire if he blinked. "I didn't ask for any of this," she added. "We were family." "No," I said quietly. "You were opportunists," she stood. "This isn't a courtroom." "You're right," I said. "It's a sanctuary," which makes your disrespect even worse. David finally spoke, voice low, thick. "We didn't mean for it to get like this." "But it did," Lorraine said flatly. "And now it ends like this." I slid one last envelope across the table. Inside, notarized deed, eviction form, ring footage stills, and the recorded voicemail transcription. Pastor Reeves stepped forward. "I've seen folks lie with charm and smile through deception. But this is a righteous reckoning. Miss Clarice has shown her work, and no one here can say they don't know the truth." He placed a hand on the binder. "This," he said, "is stewardship, and boundary, and justice." Brianna left. No words, just the click of heels and the swing of the door. David looked at me one more time, eyes full of something. Maybe shame, maybe memory, and followed her out. I didn't cry. I collected every envelope, every glance of affirmation, and stood tall. It wasn't about winning. It was about naming. At 9:56 p.m., headlights hit the driveway. David's car. He stepped out first, walked up like nothing had changed. Tried the knob. Nothing. He knocked once, then again, harder. Inside, I stood behind the curtain. He banged now, fists full of confusion. "Ma! Open the door!" From the passenger seat, Brianna sat curled with her arms crossed. I could see her lips moving, could see the streaks of mascara trailing down her cheek. She wasn't smug now. She wasn't smirking. She was just out. The Ring camera caught every second. David pacing, calling out, trying to force the knob. Then him slumping down on the steps, head in his hands. Then silence. Miss Connie's porch light blinked on across the street. She opened her screen door just enough to be seen, gave me a quiet wave. Her kind of amen. I didn't open the door. Didn't text. Didn't explain. Because the locks weren't for punishment, they were for protection. My boundaries were firm.